people were shot overnight at a club in downtown Little Rock.
Some sort of dispute broke out between individuals that were inside. An exchange of gunfire took place.
Shots just got fired and everybody just took off running.
No mother should have to go through this. They need to put the guns down, stop the violence.
When does this gun violence in Little Rock, when does it end?
I could have possibly had to try to sit down and explain to my grandbaby why her mother wasn't coming home. You know, this is unreal.
We've got to get a handle on this. It's got to be done.
We can't let this define who we are.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us both on KARK4 and Fox 16. I'm Kevin Kelly.
And I'm Victoria Price. A very, very big story we're following here. That shooting happening at the Power Ultra Lounge on West 6th Street just before 2:30 this morning. Take a look at this map right here. As you can see, the club is right in the heart of downtown Little Rock.
Yeah, here's what we know at this hour. At least 25 people were shot, 3 others injured while leaving the scene. It happened during a performance by a group from Memphis called Finesse 2 Times.
Now, miraculously, not a single casualty from this, despite how many people who were shot. All the victims here were sent to several hospitals in Little Rock, North Little Rock, and Conway.
Yeah, and according to police, the youngest of those victims, just 16 years old. And so far, no one has been arrested. Little Rock police, along with the mayor, just wrapped up a news conference at City Hall. Our very own Mitch McCoy was there. He joins us live with the latest. Mitch.
Yeah, Kevin and Victoria, good evening to both of you guys. About a minute up the road is City Hall, and that is where this news conference took place. But I want to show you guys exactly what's happening here at this nightclub at 6th and Louisiana. We're about, 15 hours after that first gunshot started being fired, and it is still a very chaotic scene. You have crime scene units here right now. You have broken glass, which we're told by the mayor and the police chief somebody jumped out of to escape all of this gunfire. There is first responder medical gloves laying in the road, and there are people's belongings too still laying in the road. I'm seeing a shirt and a lot of crime scene tape. The mayor of Little Rock says they want the Power Ultra Lounge shut down. That's the scene of this morning's mass shooting. There was a lot of emotion from city leaders. The mayor calling the incident a complete tragedy. The news conference lasting around 45 minutes. We learned officers confronted the performer's security guard earlier in the night because that security guard had a gun. That person then managed to get access to the club through a back door. At this hour, we still do not know who started firing the shots. Little Rock police say they have not been able to talk with Finesse 2 Times yet. That's the performer last night. That's something they're in the process of doing. We do know the rapper has at least 2 active warrants, including one from Forest City. Little Rock Police Chief Kenton Buckner saying they're in the very early stages of the investigation, but they believe there was some kind of dispute between gangs that sparked the gunfire.
And the challenges of both Little Rock and Memphis are well documented. I think when you have a concert venue where you have young people and it forced these 2 cities into a small room and some kind of dispute ensues, it was a recipe for a disaster.
The chief says it's still too early to know if the suspects are from the Little Rock area or if they're from Memphis or possibly both. Another thing worth noting here, the police chief said that most of all of the victims that were hit by gunfire are from the Central Arkansas area, not specifically Little Rock, but Central Arkansas as a whole. MEMS, an official from MEMS, spoke at that news conference this afternoon as well. That official crediting police officers for saving lives. They said that as soon as the officers started getting on the scene here, they started rendering first aid, so that is being credited for saving some of the lives out here. The police chief also telling us that it is very possible that some of the victims that were hit by gunfire could possibly be suspects. Again, very early in this investigation right now, so they're not ruling anything out. Coming up in about a half hour, we're going to play a little sound bite from the mayor of Little Rock, Mark Stodola. He's had something very interesting to say about a promotion flyer that was distributed. It showed a weapon. It attracted people here to this nightclub, and he had something to say about that. That's something you're not going to want to miss. That's coming up here in about a half hour at 5:30. Reporting live downtown, I'm Mitch McCoy. Back to you.
And Mitch, we do want to mention Mayor Mark Stodola will be here in studio in just about the next 20 minutes, I believe, live. But really quick, Mitch, before you go, it's a holiday weekend. It's a Saturday night. Have police talked about any sort of ramped up patrols or anything with some of the other clubs in downtown? We know Power Ultra Lounge has been shut down, but what about some of these other popular hotspots downtown? Are they going to have a bigger police presence? Do we know anything about that?
You know, that's a really good question, and I asked the police chief that question because we have seen it. It's a domino effect here in Little Rock. You have a shooting, and then all of a sudden you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 more shootings, all in retaliation, all sparked by that one original shooting, and that is a concern here. He admitted that, but he did say, and he pointed out, that there has been no chatter. There is no evidence to suggest that this shooting, this mass shooting here at this nightclub is going to spark retaliation or spark other shootings here in the near future. He says that they have detectives that monitor social media. That's something they watch out for. But he said that as of right now, they do not have any chatter. They don't have any evidence to suggest that there will be more shootings in retaliation to this morning's shooting.
All right, Mitch, that's some good news there. We'll continue to follow your angle to this big developing story. In the meantime, we continue our team coverage of this tragedy. We have 25 victims in all. 2 of those are in critical. But right now, we want to go to our very own Stephanie Sharp, who talked to one family whose loved one was at the club when that shooting went down. That person was shot and underwent surgery for several hours. Stephanie, I don't know if you were able to get an update on this person's condition, but bring us up to speed.
Hey, well, yeah, Kevin. Now, her family tells me that she is actually one of the 2 people in critical condition tonight. They say that she was shot in her shoulder and she could possibly lose her arm. And her family tells me that she was just an innocent bystander at the concert last night. They also say, and they want to send a message, that the violence has to stop here in Central Arkansas.
The only thing you hear is your child name and gunshots. I still can't believe it.
Renee Dominic says her 19-year-old daughter, Dejana Mixon, still on a ventilator in the hospital.
And I don't wish this on nobody, no mother.
She was shot at the Power Ultra Lounge shooting early Saturday morning.
Some friends knocked on my door at 3-something this morning. I didn't get a call at all. Just thank God she had some friends that knew where I live.
She says Dejana, who was in the Army, was shot in the shoulder and underwent a nearly 6-hour surgery. She says doctors may have to amputate her arm.
I thank God he saved my baby. If she got to lose her arm, I'd rather have her here breathing.
Many family members by her side.
Oh, Lord God, and we know that it could have been worse.
Yes, Lord.
Praying for Dejana and all the other people involved.
Yes. And we bless your name.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Her father, Daryl Mixon, says he didn't think his daughter would be a victim to violence.
Never have I thought I would have to be in these shoes. Never in a million years.
Asking for guns to be put down.
You have to care for your fellow human. The violence has to stop.
Leaning on faith that Dejana will recover and pleading that the shooting stop.
Please put the guns down. Stop the violence. Stop it, please. We're losing too many of our babies over nonsense.
And her family tells me that they haven't been able to talk to her yet because she still is on that ventilator. However, there are several more families dealing or going through the same emotions as that family is. Charmaine Nero, she was actually able to speak with a mother. Her daughter was sitting in the front row when all of this went down. She was able to talk with her today. Charmaine, she's in studio. What can you tell us?
Exactly, Stephanie. Nakia Baker says seeing her daughter covered in blood is the worst moment of her life. But worse than that, having to tell her granddaughter that her mother had been shot.
But she decided she wanted to go to this concert, and all that could have changed in the blink of an eye.
Nakia Baker is no stranger to violence in Little Rock.
I came through an area where we were drive-by shootings and the whole 9.
It hit a little too close to home when she got a phone call last night from one of her daughters.
We were going to have to run up to the hospital because my daughter had been shot.
Frantically, Nakia drove to Power Ultra Lounge.
And it was a war zone by the time we got there.
2 agonizing hours later.
And when we found her, she was covered in blood, her clothes. Of course, she didn't have on any shoes.
21-year-old Brinley Cunningham was in the front row when shots rang out.
This morning, I could have possibly had to try to sit down and explain to my grandbaby why her mother wasn't coming home. You know, this is unreal.
Her daughter describes the scene as bullets coming from the stage. She remembers jumping over what she thought were dead bodies.
Innocent people. Those people, when they went in there last night, they had no idea that they were going to come out of there in ambulances.
She's thankful she won't have to explain to her grandbaby her mother is gone.
Again, I could have lost my child last night. You know, I'm so thankful to God that I didn't.
Now, she says going forward, she hopes clubs tighten up security and guns aren't allowed inside. Back to you.
I'm sure she's not the only one who is thinking that, especially in light of what we witnessed earlier. You've seen the video. I've seen the video from inside the nightclub. It's just amazing when you count the number of shots that were fired.
Somewhere between 20 to 40, and that's just from one video.
Yeah, that no one was killed in that incident. For those of you who may not have seen it, we want to give you a quick peek as to how this all unfolded at around 2:30 this morning inside that club.
It's absolutely terrifying, just complete chaos you can see in that video there. Just to reiterate, 25 people were shot during this attack at this time. We know that 2 of those victims are still listed as critical. 3 others were hurt just during the chaos you can see from that video. As soon as those gunshots rang out, just chaos inside the club. 3 people hurt just trying to escape the melee of those folks trying to get out during all those chaos as the shots rang out. So obviously a total of 28 people injured in some way from this. A lot of area hospitals stepping up to help these victims. 1 in North Little Rock, 1 in Conway, and then 3 Little Rock hospitals stepping up, including UAMS.
Yeah, and that's where we find our very own Jonathan Rozelle. Jonathan, you actually talked with one doctor there as victims just started pouring in to the emergency room. Some of those victims driving themselves to the hospital.
That's absolutely right, Kevin. The ER doctor tells me that medical staff received text alerts that many of the shooting victims would be heading here to UAMS for care, and he says that's when workers sprang into action.
We definitely have nights that are busy.
UAMS Dr. William Beck says this was one of them, as several people were shot at Power Ultra Lounge.
This is traumatic, right? I mean, nobody goes out at night and expects to be shot at. Mechanism of injury.
Dr. Beck says staff were alerted via text 11 gunshot victims will be receiving care at his hospital.
And once we got word that there were multiple casualties coming, we had nurses from all over the hospital, really, that were not free, but not busy, come down to the emergency room to help out.
Authorities say 1 shooting victim went to Conway Regional. 2 others were taken to Children's Hospital. 3 shooting victims were admitted to St. Vincent in Little Rock, 3 to Baptist Hospital in Little Rock, and 6 went to Baptist Hospital in North Little Rock.
Quickly triaged.
Beck says every patient at his hospital had a doctor and at least 2 nurses.
This is not a regular incident by any stretch of the word, but they are used to dealing with sick patients, with sudden delivery of patients, with these kind of situations.
And rely on the system a couple of years old to handle gunshot victims.
Generally, I tell, we know for the most part, based on the injury pattern and the trajectory, who is going to have a harder time than the rest of them. And so for the folks that have injuries to, their hands or feet or things like that, I tell them they're going to be fine. They're in the right place. We're going to get them taken care of.
And all 25 victims were African American between 16 and 35 years old. Now, outside of the 2 in critical condition, all others had non-life-threatening injuries. Live out here, I'll send it back to you guys in the studio there.
Jonathan, the first responders, the doctors, and even the police who were first to arrive on the scene certainly deserve a lot of credit. A lot of those officers trained on how to apply tourniquets. Thank goodness for that, saving lives in the process. But one of the youngest victims, as you mentioned, was a 16-year-old. He was inside at the time of the shooting. Have you been able to determine how he was able to get in or who he might have been there with?
Kevin, I was actually able to speak to his family earlier today. They gave me the very heartbreaking news that doctors have told them that he may not be able to walk again after being shot there. I was able to ask them about him being at the club there, but they were not really able to answer that question. They said they were too distraught about his current condition, and we're just asking for everyone to just pray for their family.
Yeah, and the rest of the families as well. All right, Jonathan, thank you very much.
Well, a lot of questions tonight surrounding the club itself, the owner, what security was like, and ultimately who is responsible here. I'm Marcy Manley, learning more about the club's owner. And Marcy, you say that there's actually a paper trail following both the club and the man who owns it. Is that right?
Yeah, so far Herman Lewis hasn't answered phone calls or responded to requests for comment about the shooting at his club, aside from hanging up on Jonathan Rozelle. But we have learned that there appear to be court cases for debts owed against Herman Lewis in the past month, and it appears there may be other issues like taxes owed as well. Alcoholic beverage control officials say there have been 7 violations cited against the Power Ultra Lounge since 2012, including multiple violations for underage drinking. ABC is suspended the lounge's mixed drink license with at least 3 potential violations at play at this point. Lewis will have the chance to appear at an ABC hearing on July 10th. Those potential violations against the club at this point include allowing possession of weapons on the premises, disorderly conduct, and failure to be a good neighbor. City officials say they intend to try and shut down the Power Ultra Lounge location. Back to you.
Thank you very much. And of course, Fox 16 and KARK, the only stations with continuous coverage. Early this morning, we had several Arkansas politicians call in during our newscasts and give their reaction to this act of violence. Governor Asa Hutchinson saying violence like this is unacceptable.
We're all praying for those that have been impacted by this, the victims and their families. But we're also looking at the larger picture of the community where we live, and this is just totally unacceptable that this kind of violence is impacting our community. It's really time that we bear additional resources to fight this kind of violence.
Senator Tom Cotton also reacting. He posted to Twitter saying, quote, "I appreciate the quick action of the Little Rock Police Department in response to last night's shooting. My prayers are with all involved." And Senator John Bozeman also speaking out today, saying in part, quote, "Kathy and I send our prayers to the victims of this tragic violence. I continue to stand and support law enforcement to fight this ongoing reckless violence in our capital city."
And Kevin, almost no one has been as outspoken about this as Little Rock Mayor Mark Stodola. He joins us now in studio. Thanks for being here. We do wish it were under better circumstances.
Yes, I do too.
But Mayor, in that press conference earlier, you called what happened at the Power Ultra Lounge, quote, "a heartbreak that is all too familiar." So what steps does the city need to take? Where do we go from here to make sure this is not something we're familiar with any longer?
Well, let me just say, first of all, that my heart was broken this morning, as it has been many times recently, when I wake up and hear about some tragedy, some issue of violence that's occurred in our city where someone has used a gun to settle a dispute. And certainly this tragedy at the Power Ultra Lounge is absolutely outrageous. It's horrendous. There are people, the wrong people having guns that need to be apprehended. They need to be prosecuted. So I'll tell you that communication and getting information from people to help solve these various crimes is so very, very important. Now, that's one thing that will help us to try and put a lid on this kind of activity. And it's very, very important that the community come together. We need people to respond and talk to our police officers who are doing the investigations on these cases.
And I want to get to that in just a second. First, I know it's not even been a full day since this tragic event occurred. The city did take some immediate steps, for example, steps to shut down Power Ultra Lounge as far as a club is concerned. You took these immediate steps, but looking long term, like you said, outreach with the community, shutting down one club is not going to stop the violence. The violence will presumably move to another club. So what needs to happen here to make sure that doesn't move to another club?
Well, I don't know that it'll move to another club or not. I mean, a lot of these clubs are highly regulated. They have security inside. They have off-duty police officers outside.
But there was that last night, and that didn't stop it.
The situation that happened last night, obviously, somebody let people in with guns on their hips, from what I understand. That was, the police had tried to prevent that from happening, and this happened after they were off duty. Again, they patrol on the outside of the building. They're not on the inside of the building. Certainly, a word to all of the clubs and late night places that we have open, very strictly, that we're going to be monitoring those places, trying to make sure that they are safe, working with the owners of these properties. The Ultra Lounge is being shut down. I'm going to make sure that it is shut down. The ABC has suspended their license. We're looking at what type of a privilege license they had. They're not operating properly. The person who manages the large building there has already indicated he's serving eviction notices to them. So this incident is certainly going to spark a review of the other late night locations that we have, and to see what we can do to try and make sure that we do everything to keep people safe.
So what steps will those be? Because you talked about that in the press conference towards the end, as far as maybe reevaluating some of these clubs, some of these nightclubs and late night places with Bruce Moore, city manager. What are you hoping to get out of that, or what are you hoping to do as far as reevaluating some of these evening hotspots?
Well, I've said that nothing good happens between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so if you take that as a premise, you still have people who want to socialize in the evening. We went through an extensive review of that about 2 years ago and came up with some stricter rules and laws. Obviously, the issue of guns and what's happening about allowing guns in bars and restaurants is something that when you mix it with alcohol and you mix it with music and late nights, it's not a very good mixture. It's not a very good recipe for keeping things safe. And so I think we've got to look at that along with what the ABC can do in terms of regulating the use of alcohol and the presence of weapons as well. So we're going to do a full-scale review of our zoning ordinances and our codes to see if there's something that can be done to better help keep these locations safe.
And in the long term, the first thing you mentioned, guns falling into the wrong hands.
Well, let me mention,
this has been this is a very, very tricky issue, not just for the city of Little Rock, but for the state of Arkansas, and really for the entire United States. Where do you find that balance of not infringing upon rights, but then also making sure the public is safe?
Well,
what can you do, or what are you hoping to do as far as that's concerned?
Well, certainly, I understand the importance of the Second Amendment as it relates to people and the right to bear arms. The issue here is we've got the wrong people bearing arms. We've got a preponderance of people who are felons who carry weapons on the streets. I can predict that in this instance you're going to find that many of the people involved in this case are going to have prior felony records. They shouldn't be having guns. They shouldn't be carrying guns. So we've got to work with the state on the probation and parole in our community corrections department much more vigorously about monitoring and apprehending people who are violating their terms of parole by carrying weapons. We need more cases adopted by the federal court system, which will put people in jail for 8 years on a felon in possession of a firearm charge. That's something that we can aggressively work on. So we're working with ATF and the FBI. They've all pledged their support to assist us with this. I've talked with the governor, and the governor and I are going to be forming a group of people that we can work with to try and focus and target these people who are felons that are carrying guns. And I think there's quite a few of them. I've done some research myself on it, and I know that there's many that are walking around violating their rules of probation.
One last question before we have to go. I want to ask you, and this was a sensitive subject that was brought up during the press conference at City Hall earlier today. Does Little Rock have a gang problem? It was a gang problem. That was a term that Chief Buckner, Police Chief Buckner, did not want to use the word. He didn't want to, he was very dicey and careful with his words.
Well, he used the word. There are two groups of people we know right now that you would call them gangs. They're groups of people that hang together.
But would you say Little Rock has a gang problem?
Well, to the extent that we've got these drive-by shootings that have continued, I would say yes. It's not to the extent that it was anywhere near what it was when I was the prosecutor in the 1990s.
Yeah, I don't want to fear-monger and say that it's back to the 90s.
That's what I don't want you to do. I want people to understand that this is fairly isolated.
Okay.
It's very specific. We think it's with a small group of people. It is not widespread, but it certainly is people that are hanging together that have some commonality to themselves and who are in some way retaliating against people that have done something to them that they feel needs retaliation. They're doing it with weapons and violence instead of resolving it in other ways. So as a city, we need the community to come together. This is not something that our police chief can solve alone. This is not something that the mayor can solve alone. It's not something that the city directors can solve alone, or a minister can solve alone, or any one person like yourself or anyone else. We've got to have people coming together who are pledged and committed to making sure that we bring safety back to the streets of our city. I woke up with a sickened stomach this morning when I found out about this, and because we're throwing lots of resources into it, and I want to see progress being made. And certainly this was a very big tragedy. I can only thank God that no one was killed. I mean, that is in itself a miracle, I truly believe. And so we're going to be redoubling and reinforcing our efforts to do everything we can to not only bring the people to justice and to apprehend them and convict them, but to see what we can do to try and get the guns out of the hands of the wrong people.
Something this big, I would imagine, has to kind of be a breaking point. Mayor, thanks so much for coming in again. I apologize, not under the best of circumstances, but hopefully this will be a breaking point. Hopefully we will see the community really band together and mean it this time to try to fight back against this. We do want to mention Mayor Stodola will be one of the many people out at City Hall tonight. There is a prayer vigil, a candlelight vigil, not just for the victims, but to pray for peace in general here in the capital city, this larger issue of violence. That's going to be at 8:15 tonight at City Hall. That is open to the public, and we'll also live stream that for you on both our KARK4 and Fox 16 Facebook pages.
And as you just heard the mayor say, it's worth repeating, a police chief, a minister, even a mayor can't solve all the violence. In fact, earlier at his news conference, he said, we're not Superman. We can't stop a speeding bullet, but collectively, as a community, we can make a change and bring safety back to the city. I want to bring in Fox 16's Jessie Teneur. She joins us live from the nightclub, where many of the neighbors there say the mass shooting certainly is not going to make them neglect their city, but rather some of them are going to, stand up and fight for it, right?
Yeah, Kevin, that's exactly right. A 21-year-old who recently moved to the downtown area, he wanted to move down here to provide a better life for him, his wife, and their newborn baby. And he was saying while a mass shooting may discourage some people, it certainly doesn't. It motivates them. Many Arkansans enjoyed a Saturday stroll through downtown Little Rock.
He's so pretty.
Families walking past historic buildings, the famous River Market. But for those who made it to 6th Street, the scenery quickly turned ugly.
That's not cool, you know what I'm saying? People got babies like myself.
Just 2 weeks after Cepeda Munoz moved his family downtown, 25 people ranging in age from 16 to 35 were shot right down the street during a concert at Power Ultra Lounge.
That's just ridiculous. It's like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to be comfortable with leaving my wife, and my baby alone.
This wasn't the first time older residents of the downtown area have seen the police cars and caution tape.
There have been some incidents and some gunfire before.
But Indy Stewart, who's lived across the street from the nightclub for 6 years, believes even a mass shooting is no reason to move.
There's going to be problems anywhere you live.
But a new dad believes it is a reason to change.
We need to stop the violence, really.
In Munoz's short 21 years of life, he's learned firsthand people need to want to change before a community can unite.
It's not about, what colors you're wearing. It's not about how your hat's hanging. It's not about if your pants are sagging. Like, it's not just amongst black people.
Munoz envisions a better world for his daughter, Harmony Faith.
I love her. And I think this is what people need to do it for, really. The next generation.
And calls on his new neighborhood to get to work.
I just hope that she's able to grow up just different, because all this is crazy.
And just to reiterate, we're sick of talking about this violence. A lot of you at home are sick of hearing about it. But really, we can't stop the violence, like Munoz was saying, unless these people creating the violence care about their own lives and care about the lives of others. And so exactly what can we do to make them do that? Well, that remains to be unseen, Kevin.
Yeah, but, I credit those who are not willing to turn and run away out of fear. I mean, you live in downtown, Jessie. Is there a far spread feeling of resilience there, or is there more fear? And I know your job as a reporter is to not put yourself in the story, but you yourself, having lived in downtown, have been a victim of violence.
Yeah, that's right, Kevin. I mean, a lot of us who live downtown, we're not going to let fear chase us out of our homes. It's a lot of people have been saying that we can't live day by day scared of what's going to happen to us when we step out of our doors. We just have to try to put ourselves at least in the right situations, but we can't let fear drive our lives. And that seems to be kind of the general harmonious thing that's coming out of downtown. Some neighbors that I've been able to talk to of mine are saying, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to let these people drive us out of our own homes.
More people to step step up to the plate.
Absolutely.
All right, Jesse, thank you so much.
And we are also learning more about the performer behind last night's performance. Finesse 2 times. Legal name Ricky Hampton. He's a Memphis-based performer. We searched through records, quite a few records actually, and found that violence has broken out at many of his concerts, including another one right here in Arkansas. We're going to have much more on that tonight at 9 and 10. But today, the rapper did take to social media to give his condolences to those who were injured in last night's gunfire, saying, "Prayers go out to the innocent people and their family that came out to support me. The violence is not for the club people. We all come with one motive at the end of the day, and that's to have fun. So again, I send my condolences to the people who were hurt."
And the Downtown Little Rock Partnership also reacting to this morning's mass shooting, saying, quote, "Our thoughts and well wishes go out to those injured and affected by this senseless act. We wish for their speedy recoveries. We want to commend the Little Rock Police Department, first responders, and medical staff for their quick actions. Today, we help those in need while also acknowledging that there will be more conversations to be had in the coming days."
And just as a recap for you, 25 people shot early this morning at Power Ultra Lounge right in the heart of downtown Little Rock.
Yeah, we have crews spread all across the capital city tonight, bringing you the most comprehensive coverage from every angle. Our team coverage continues right now on both KARK4 and Fox 16 News.
People were shot overnight at a club in downtown Little Rock.
Some sort of dispute broke out between individuals that were inside. An exchange of gunfire took place.
The shots just got fired and everybody just took out running.
No mother should have to go through this. They need to put the guns down, stop the violence.
When does this gun violence in Little Rock, when does it end?
I could have possibly had to try to sit down and explain to my grandbaby why her mother wasn't coming home. You know, this is unreal.
We've got to get a handle on this. It's got to be done.
We can't let this define who we are.
It's been quite the day here in Central Arkansas. Our team coverage of this morning's mass shooting in downtown Little Rock continues. Good evening. I'm Kevin Kelly with Fox 16.
And I'm Victoria Price with KARK4. That shooting, that terrifying shooting you saw the video of just moments ago, happened at the Power Ultra Lounge. That's on West 6th Street just before 2:30 this morning. Take a look at this map right here. As you can see, that is right in the heart of downtown Little Rock and on a Friday night.
And here's what we know at this hour. At least 25 people were shot, 3 others injured while they were leaving the scene. It all happened during a performance by a group from Memphis called Finesse 2 times.
Now, miraculously, and we do not want to ignore this, not a single casualty from this, despite how many people who were shot last night. All those victims sent to several hospitals in Little Rock, North Little Rock, and Conway. And according to police, the youngest of those victims, just 16 years old.
Yeah, hard to believe. We'll have more on that 16-year-old in just a moment, but we should also point out that surprisingly, so far, no one has been arrested and that the investigation is far from over. Little Rock police and other city officials holding a press conference late this afternoon at City Hall. Our very own Mitch McCoy was there. He joins us live with more on what was said. Mitch.
Yeah, Kevin and Victoria. So while all of the city leaders, the police chief, the city manager, the official at MEMS was holding this news conference, crime scene techs were still going through, analyzing this scene nearly 15 hours after that first shot was fired here at the Power Ultra Lounge here in downtown Little Rock. You see the crime scene truck here. There are still those windows at the top of the second floor here still shattered. We're told by the police chief that 2 people jumped out of those windows for their lives. They didn't want to be a victim to this gunfire. They were jumping out of those windows, so they were not injured in this mass shooting. I was walking a little up and down Louisiana here, and I saw some medical gloves. I saw some debris. I saw people's clothes still littering the road here. But nonetheless, that news conference was happening right up the road. The mayor of Little Rock says they want this lounge shut down. This is the scene of the mass shooting. There was a lot of emotion from city leaders. The mayor calling this morning's incident a complete tragedy. This all lasted about 45 minutes today. That's how long reporters were asking questions. That's how much some of these city leaders wanted to get off their chest. We learned officers officers confronted the performer's security guard earlier in the night because that security guard had a gun. That person then managed to get access to the club through a back door. At this hour, we still do not know who started firing the shots, but Little Rock police say they have not been able to talk with the performer, the rapper, Phineas, 2 times yet. That's something they're in the process of doing. We do know the rapper has at least 2 active warrants, including one from Forest City, Arkansas. There was a poster promoting the concert that showed the entertainer holding a gun. The mayor says that is a red flag.
We also should be outraged that a promotional video with a gun on the front cover inviting people to a concert suggesting the issues of violence should also be totally unacceptable in our community.
Chief Kenton Buckner saying they're in the very early stages of the investigation. They believe there was some kind of dispute between gangs that sparked the gunfire that happened this morning. The chief says it's still too early to know if the suspects are from the Little Rock area or if they are from Memphis. We heard a lot from the city manager, the police chief, the mayor of Little Rock. Some interesting notes here, and you guys were talking to the attorney general earlier, but there have been a lot of people talking at the state capitol just a minute up the road here. I want to bring in our political reporter, Jesse Tonera. You've been tracking some of these statements that are coming in. What are people saying? What are these state representatives saying? What are these senators saying? Because this is a local issue, but the Capitol's right down the road, so this affects them just as much as anybody else.
Exactly. And I mean, you can't, an issue like this brings together both sides of the aisle, no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. First and foremost, people have just been saying that, of course, our hearts go out to these victims, and everyone is just calling this a tragedy. But I mean, these state lawmakers are saying we really have to work with the city. They're all about kind of coming together. And I know the governor said in his statement that he's willing to try to work with whatever state assets they need to cut down on this, because he says that there needs to be, the governor was saying that there needs to be kind of this new law enforcement strategy. And, you know, how do we come up with that? How do we really try to reach these people that are creating the problems? You know, lawmakers from the state and local levels have definitely had this resounding message that, you know, we might not have an exact answer yet. It may not come down to legislation. It may not come down to one strategy with law enforcement, but we are willing to work together because this violence has got to stop.
Right, you're absolutely right. And what was kind of interesting, and we see it from time to time at this news conference this afternoon at City Hall, we had people, just ordinary people coming to City Hall, even asking the police chief, I live in a hot zone or a hot target. This is the area where there's repeated crime. Does this mean violence is going to go up? Is there going to be retaliation? The police chief saying that there's no chatter on social media about retaliation in the city, but saying it is a community. It's a group effort to get this to stop. So some very interesting points coming, not just being sparked from here at the nightclub, but here at the state capitol too, about let's stop the violence. Let's bring people together. Let's figure out, you know, where this is, you know, being sparked from. But it also starts at that poster, you know, the poster promoting the gun. I think the mayor hit the nail on the head there when saying this is what was being promoted right here in our community. So as we toss it back to you guys, you and I were talking to that gentleman that just came up here. He lost his cell phone inside this nightclub and hasn't been able to get it back yet. So I'm sure more people's belongings are also in this nightclub and they're waiting for him. Back to you.
All right, Mitch, thank you. Mitch, live from the scene as it stands right now. I want to bring in Price McKeon, who was actually one of the first members of our team to be on that scene last night. You got to Power Ultra Lounge around, what, 3 o'clock in the morning? Set that scene for us.
Okay, so the call went out around 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's when the call first went out to police. Immediately we started receiving phone calls and started working our sources to try to find out what was going on. By 3 o'clock we had someone from our desk get to the scene while I ran back here, grabbed our camera, and then got to the scene. So by less than an hour we're there. When we first got on scene, the best way to describe it is this energy. You just didn't really know what exactly was going on. You weren't sure. There were a few groups of people, maybe 5.
Were there still a lot of people there? I would imagine the police presence was very heavy at that point. Were people kind of sticking around, the ones that hadn't been hurt, or did everyone just get out of there?
Well, it was kind of interesting. At first, when I first got there within the hour, there were still a few groups here and there, maybe 5, 10 people here,
Okay,
maybe
so
5 or 10
people kind of lingering
here.
to see what exactly went down.
Right, and then as soon as we walked over, then they just kind of were gone and they didn't want to talk to us, things like that. And then at that point, the police presence was there. But I kind of want to describe.
How big? I mean, how many officers are we talking here?
Exactly. I can't even tell you, to be honest with you. That's how big it was. And that's not because I wasn't trying to count. That's just how big this was.
Like you said, it shut down part of downtown, you said almost.
Right, it did. It shut down multiple streets, just trying to get to the crime scene, trying to meet up with other media groups so we could get those interviews from the chief. That was just a step in itself, just getting there and getting together and making sure that we were all together and finding the information at that point. So, but the crime scene was so big, it shut down multiple blocks. And then the crime scene tape, there were like layers of crime scene tape. So you had the initial around the club, and then you had even maybe, I would say 20, 30 yards, another round of crime scene tape. And then back even more crime scene tape, to the point I can tell you that I saw with my own eyes blood outside of crime scene tape. That's how big this crime scene was. That it wasn't even all sectioned off, where there was still visible marks where people who were bleeding must have jumped in cars in this parking lot. So first the energy, it was all there. And then as the sun came up, it got almost eerie quiet.
And I'll add, you were there then all morning. You were there until what, 10 o'clock this morning, from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. So you were there for the whole evolution of that scene.
Absolutely. I was on the phone starting by around 2:45 in the morning. I didn't get off the phone or finish talking to sources and just calling police, trying to get more information until 10 this morning. Then I came back here, did go home for a little bit and grab a bite to eat. But now I'm back here still trying to get more information.
And still an active scene, as we saw Mitch McCoy out a few minutes ago. Still quite a bit of police presence at this hour.
Absolutely. He is getting closer to the club, so that is interesting to go back there. But even when I was driving back in, I kind of went by the scene on my way in because it's just down the road from where we are right now at our studio. And there were still, you still see police there. But kind of want to go back to, it was eerie quiet. It was really eerie quiet there. And then at this point, they're just still investigating and what Mitch is describing right now.
And we do want to continue to follow this. We're going to go back out to Stephanie Sharp joining us again. Stephanie, you spoke with one of the victims' families, one of the victims of the shooting last night, telling you their loved one was in surgery for several hours. What else can you tell us?
Hey, Victoria. Now, the family of the 19-year-old that was in that nightclub last night, they tell me that she was just an innocent bystander, and they got a knock on their door this morning telling them that she was involved in all of this. Now, that 19-year-old, her name is Dejana Mixon, and we are told by her family that she is in critical condition. We do know that 2 people are in critical condition, so we believe that she is one of the 2. She was shot in her shoulder, and her family says she underwent a 6-hour surgery. And they tell me that the doctors tell them that she could possibly lose her arm. They say she's in the Army and she was just enjoying a Friday night concert with friends and ended up shot. And her family says that they did not think that they would become a victim of violence.
And you never know how you feel until you in them shoes. I'm in the shoes right now, so I know how I feel.
Now, she is on a ventilator currently, and they haven't been able to talk to their daughter because she is still on that ventilator. And her mom, like I was saying earlier, her mom told me this afternoon that around 3 o'clock this morning, luckily her friends knew exactly where her mother lived, so they went to her mother's house as soon as they left the nightclub last night, knocked on her door, told her that her daughter had been shot, and that's how she found out. She never received a call from anyone. She says she immediately went to the hospital, and she's been there ever since. And they tell me that their family, her entire family, there's about a dozen of them that we saw today. They're going to be right by her bedside waiting until she does recover. And her family told me about possibly losing her arm. They did do that surgery, and they tell me that the doctors told them that they're going to give her 24 hours to see what heals and what's going on before they decide whether or not they'll have to amputate. So, of course, a lot of emotion, a lot of families, several families, many families are dealing with today. And this is just one of many families dealing with just so much emotion coming out of this shooting early this morning.
Stephanie Sharp live there. And of course, Stephanie, all of our thoughts and prayers go with these families that have been affected by this just horrific event as well. Fox 16 and KARK, the only stations with continuous coverage this morning. Several state leaders calling in with a reaction to this very upsetting act of violence. Governor Asa Hutchinson saying something like this is just unacceptable.
We're all praying for those that have been impacted by this, the victims and their families. But we're also looking at the larger picture of the community where we live, and this is just totally unacceptable that this kind of violence is impacting our community. It's really time that we bear additional resources to fight this kind of violence.
And just for clarification purposes, you may have seen on your screen 17 people shot. That has been updated. That was sound from earlier this morning. 25 people were shot, 3 others injured. Meanwhile, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton also reacting. He posted to Twitter saying, "I appreciate the quick action of the Little Rock Police Department in response to last night's shooting. My prayers are with all involved." And Senator John Bozeman also speaking out today, saying in part, "Kathy and I send our prayers to the victims of this tragic violence. I continue to stand and support law enforcement to fight this ongoing reckless violence in our capital city." Joining us now to discuss the tragedy further, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kevin.
How did you find out about this?
Like so many Arkansans, I was watching the news this morning and saw it come across my television. I immediately went to Twitter, started reaching out to other authorities across the state and here in Little Rock to hear the specifics and to offer my office's assistance into what we could do.
The public has heard from city leaders, state leaders, officials saying we've reached a boiling point. We're sick and tired of all this violence. Now we're looking for the solutions. What solutions might you be able to bring to the table?
Well, I think as the governor has stated, and I agree, that we need to enforce the laws on the books. We also need to work with local authorities. We need to encourage more community engagement with law enforcement when they are hear of incidents or individuals who are looking to commit violent acts or violent crimes. If there is any disruption between particular groups and disputes that perhaps could escalate into a situation that we saw early this morning, to come forward with that information beforehand, that we must have more engagement by community leaders, by members of the community, working with law enforcement. I know, again, that my office is going to be working hand in hand with the local authorities. Chief Buckner, I spoke with him earlier. I spoke with the mayor earlier, offering the assistance of the Attorney General's office. We have a number of things that we are already working on. There's a violence reduction network, pilot program in West Memphis and Little Rock. These are across the country to address violent crimes such as this and to try to curb those violent crimes.
There's no quick fix to this, obviously. I mean, as Mayor Stodola said earlier, I mean, a minister can't do it, an attorney general can't do it, a police chief can't do it all by themselves. The community has to rally together. So if there's no quick fix, what should we be doing tomorrow to at least get that ball rolling even harder?
Well, what I would advise people across Arkansas, whether you're taking to a Facebook post or you're speaking from the pulpit, let's remind one another about the importance of love and respect for each other, human life. We saw this morning in this tragic incident that there was a lack of value for human life, lack of value for another person, that we need to have civil discourse when we have disagreements, that we don't need to take to violence. This was an absolutely despicable act, and we hope that by talking to one another, by getting community leaders engaged with law enforcement, state and local leaders and federal law enforcement, that perhaps we can curb this violence, that these sort of actions will not be tolerated in Little Rock. They will not be tolerated across the state. Moms and dads deserve to have their kids grow up in safe neighborhoods. When young people go out to have fun with one another, they need to be in safe places. And whether it's an entertainer encouraging violence or those who come to those shows encouraging violence, we need to shut that down.
In light of last night's incident, we heard the police chief say earlier today, after further investigation, that one individual was stopped prior to getting inside the club who had a concealed carry gun on him. However, others were able to get inside that club armed with guns. it certainly raises the question of the concealed carry law here in the state of Arkansas as it pertains to bars and restaurants and so forth, where they're allowed to. Does that need to be revisited?
Well, I think it's important to clarify the individual that the chief spoke about was openly carrying a firearm, not concealed carry, and it's not clear yet, or I'm not aware yet, whether that individual had a license to conceal and carry. So the laws that were passed had to do with conceal and carry license. The individual last night was openly carrying a firearm. That is still prohibited under Arkansas law. You may not carry, unless you have a specific license, you may not carry a firearm into an establishment that serves alcohol. It's a misdemeanor charge. Nonetheless, it is a criminal charge.
Which is why he was stopped.
If you do so.
Yeah. Does it still require, though, a closer look?
Well, I believe it requires a closer look at enforcing the laws that we have on the books, because that's what we need to do. Individuals who have committed an act who should not have a firearm because they are perhaps a felon in possession of a firearm, we need to enforce those laws. We need to enforce laws certainly if someone is carrying a firearm without any sort of license, law enforcement or otherwise, into an establishment such as a bar or a nightclub. But again, Kevin, I think it's important for Arkansans to understand that these are laws that we have on the books that can be enforced, but we need community leaders. We need to work together with law enforcement. We need to shut down anti-law enforcement rhetoric so people do feel comfortable coming to law enforcement. Chief Buckner's made it loud and clear that he wants to work with community leaders in solving this crime problem, this crime spree that we've seen over the last couple of weeks in Little Rock.
So how do you see this playing out in the coming days? I mean, is this going to be a collaborative effort where you're constantly in contact with the governor, with the mayor, and getting this ball rolling in addition to the police chief?
Well, I think it's what will happen is that the evidence will be continued to be gathered. Hopefully, we will have more individuals and know the specific names of those who committed these acts, who fired those shots, who injured those 25 people, the 3 people that were injured as they were trying to leave. Individuals could be looked at, but again, we need to have law enforcement gather information. If there's someone out there tonight that's watching this news report and picks up on information about who fired those shots, who committed these acts, please come forward. This is the time where we need more information so that way we can hold those responsible accountable.
Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, thank you so much
for
being
Kevin.
here. Appreciate it. I know it's a difficult topic. Well, several community members and leaders are scheduled to gather for a candlelight and prayer vigil at City Hall tonight to pray not just for the victims, but also for peace in the capital city. That vigil is set to begin at around 8 o'clock this evening. We will have live stream coverage of the event on both Fox 16 and KARK's Facebook pages. First responders, as you well know, Victoria, certainly had a busy night last night, but they're also getting the praise and merit that they deserve, right?
Oh, absolutely, and for very, very good reason when you consider the magnitude of that shooting, the number of victims involved, many of whom ended up at several different hospitals, scattering really all across the Little Rock metro area. Little Rock police say the shooting victims were cared for at one North Little Rock Hospital, one Conway Hospital, and 4 different Little Rock hospitals, including UAMS. A UAMS doctor says he started getting text alerts that 11 of those victims would be cared for at his hospital, at his emergency room. He says every available doctor and nurse were there ready to receive those patients as they came in.
Well, you know, this is traumatic, right? I mean, nobody goes out at night and expects to be shot at. Generally, I tell, you know, we know for the most part, based on the injury pattern and the trajectory, who is going to have a harder time than the rest of them. And so for the folks that have injuries to, you know, their hands or feet or things like that, I tell them they're going to be fine. They're in the right place. We're going to get them taken care of.
Those 25 shooting victims were all between the ages of 16 and 35 years old. Of those, at this hour, we know 2 are in critical condition. The others, according to police, all sustained non-life-threatening injuries.
We're also learning more about the performer behind last night's performance. Finessed 2 times. The lead performer identified as Ricky Hampton. Now, this is a poster from last night's event. Take a good look at this. According to documents, there have been several violent incidents at several of his concerts, including another one in Arkansas. But this is the one that was promoting the event here in Little Rock. And if you take a close look, you can see what he's holding. It certainly got a lot of attention, especially from the mayor. We've also learned that as of 4 p.m. this afternoon, police had not talked to him. No arrests have been made. I'm not saying he's guilty or anything, but they have not talked to him. course, we'll have much more on that coming up on Fox 16 News at 9 and KARK at 10. But earlier, he took to social media, giving his condolences to those who were injured in the gunfire, saying prayers go out to the innocent people and their family that came out to support me. The violence is not for the club people. We all come with one motive at the end of the day, and that's to have fun. So again, I send my condolences to the people who were hurt.
And that shooting at Power Ultra Lounge, by definition, marks the third mass shooting in Little Rock in the past 3 years.
Yeah, our own Marcy Manley looking through the statistics to try and get some context on mass shootings here in Arkansas and across the country. And Marcy, in terms of over the past few years, I know Arkansas now ranks in the top 5 for most dangerous mass shootings. That's hard to believe.
Yeah, it is when you take a look at the numbers, but according to the shooting tracking organization Gun Violence Archives, those 25 gunshot victims actually places this Arkansas shooting and makes it the 4th largest mass shooting in the United States since 2013, and mass shootings have continued to climb in this country year after year.
Oh my God.
Orlando, Florida. San Bernardino, California. Waco, Texas. And now, Little Rock, Arkansas.
People injured. I didn't associate it with Little Rock.
These are the 4 largest mass shootings in America since 2013 to date, according to Gun Violence Archives mass shooting tracker. It uses the same definition of mass shooting as the FBI. 4 more shooting victims, excluding the shooter, in the same incident.
Oh my gosh, not here.
On July 1st, 2017, the city of Little Rock experienced its 3rd mass shooting in a year, putting the total mass shootings in Arkansas since 2014 at 9, with 71 gunshot victims.
See this on the news all over the world, senseless violence, but and we've got an issue here in Little Rock.
Mass shootings in the United States have been on the rise over the past 3 years. Since 2014, the number of mass shootings growing from 261 in 2014 to 384 in 2016, a 47% increase. 173 reported for 2017 already.
But with something of this magnitude, you immediately think, okay, this is not in a faraway place. This is in the town where I live, the community that I love.
And as the sun sets on Arkansas's capital city, many will be asking themselves, how do we fix this? Will tomorrow be brighter? And what's to blame? Now, a lot of people have been asking questions about a new law passed that allows concealed carry guns in Arkansas bars. That law is not in effect at this point, won't be until September 1st. Furthermore, people who want to carry concealed inside bars would have to have 8 additional hours of training from Arkansas State Police, and bars can actually bar concealed carry inside those even under that law with written notice. Guys?
Now, Marcy, I know you've been looking into the bar, you've been looking into the owner, some of the just operational protocol, I guess, if you will, with this bar as far as security is concerned. Do we know if this is a place that was patting down people, or if they had any sort of security procedure, if they had any policy against having weapons in the bar? Do we know anything as to that?
Well, at this point, weapons aren't allowed to be on the premises. That's one of the mixed drink permit violations that ABC is actually looking into. They've emergency suspended their license at this point, and they signed it a potential violation as being weapons on the premises, causing a disturbance and not being a good neighbor. Also, to that effect, we've heard anecdotally that there were pat downs, people were screened, depending on who they were, but nothing that's been confirmed from police. And at that point, I think that's one of the big questions as to what was done inside the club, what was known by those who operated it, and who should be held accountable at this point for that.
Yeah, it was also interesting during the news conference at 4 o'clock, Marcy, that you may have heard of it, that the city manager Bruce Moore said that that particular establishment was not classified as a club, but rather as a restaurant.
Yeah, and that's another question that I think is going to allow for a lot of room for follow-up with officials and what programs we have in place to police those places, to make sure that they're abiding by the permits that they have, and make sure that agencies are communicating to one another, so that if one agency is aware that they're operating one way and the city needs to know about it, or vice versa, that there are some channels of communication to police those locations.
All right, Marcy.
And say Marcy's been looking into this all day. We really appreciate your hard work, Marcy. Once again, a recap of what we know about this shooting. It happened at Power Ultra Lounge just before 2:30 this morning. This is right in downtown, a very busy part of downtown, especially on a Friday night at that hour. At least 25 people we know of were shot. 3 others injured, not by gunfire, but just during the chaos of trying to leave that scene. This was all during a performance by a group from Memphis. They were on stage, we're told, when that gunfire rang out. Amazingly, however, no one died. All victims were sent to several hospitals in North Little Rock, and Conway. According to police, the youngest of those victims, just 16 years old. Another big question that been on a lot of people's minds as to why a 16-year-old was there in the first place.
Yeah, and as Jonathan Rizal reported earlier, unfortunately, that 16-year-old shot in the back. There is concern that he may not be able to walk again, but we'll continue to monitor that situation as well as other victims as well. And we will continue to have coverage of this mass shooting throughout the night for you. So for the very latest, be sure to watch Fox 16 News at 9 and KARK 4 News at 10. We'll also live stream that candlelight prayer vigil on both of our station's Facebook pages. That's scheduled to take place right around 8 o'clock tonight.
And as always, you can get the very latest on both ArkansasMatters.com and Fox16.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll send you back to your regularly scheduled programming.
17 people were shot overnight at a club in downtown Little Rock.
Shots just got fired and everybody just took off running.
When does this gun violence in Little Rock, when does it end?
We've got to get a handle on this.
I want our city officials, I want our police, I want our state officials, I want our stations, Fox 16 and KARK, to do everything we can in our power to curb some of this violence.
We can't let this define who we are.